The galactic empire was vast, its reach extending across countless systems, binding hundreds of worlds under its iron grip. To the empire, humans were just another species to be catalogued, conquered, and tamed. They were a curiosity more than a threat, fragile, primitive, and hopelessly bound to their emotions. When Earth fell under the empire's control, its people were treated as little more than amusing pets or disposable tools. The empire's arrogance had blinded it to the latent potential within humanity. John's first memory of the empire was a blur of chaos and humiliation. He had been rounded up alongside countless others, herded into ships like livestock. The towering alien overlords loomed over the frightened humans, their crimson eyes devoid of empathy. The Empire's soldiers took pride in subjugating their new pets, parading their dominance with cruel efficiency. John, however, refused to cower. Beneath his calm exterior burned a quiet fury, a determination to survive and observe. The alien commander who owned John regarded him with mild amusement, believing him to be docile and harmless. To the commander, John was a trophy, an exotic addition to his menagerie of conquered beings. For months, John played the role expected of him. He obeyed commands, remained silent, and gave no indication of the fire simmering within. He studied everything, the Empire's technology, its language, its culture. The aliens never noticed his sharp gaze or the way he pieced together their weaknesses. The Empire's overconfidence was evident in every interaction. They spoke freely around John, assuming he couldn't comprehend their language. They flaunted their superiority, demonstrating advanced weapons and technologies that they believed humanity could never hope to replicate. Yet, in their arrogance, they overlooked the adaptability of their new pets. John noticed the cracks in their system. The Empire's soldiers relied heavily on rigid protocols, their strategies predictable and dependent on technological superiority. Their hierarchy was strict but bloated with bureaucracy, leaving critical decisions mired in delays. John stored these observations away, building a mental map of their weaknesses. It wasn't long before John's facade was tested. The commander, bored of his compliant pet, decided to showcase him during a gathering of Imperial elites. They laughed as John was forced into a mock battle with another human, the aliens betting on who would win. John refused to play their game, standing motionless in silent defiance. The crowd jeered, but the commander's eyes darkened with irritation. He ordered his guards to teach John a lesson, believing pain would break his spirit. What the commander didn't understand was that humanity's strength lay not in physical might but in endurance. John took the punishment without a word, his silence more unnerving than any outcry. Even as the blows landed, his mind worked, filing away the guards' movements, their patterns, and the flaws in their armor. Each strike only fueled his resolve, his determination to turn their arrogance against them. In the weeks that followed, John's reputation among the humans began to grow. Whispers spread about the man who defied the Empire, the human who refused to be broken. John remained cautious, knowing the Empire's surveillance was ever present. He moved carefully, communicating in subtle gestures and coded words. His defiance inspired others, sparking a quiet but growing resistance among the humans in captivity. The aliens continued to underestimate him, believing humanity incapable of meaningful rebellion. They paraded John as a defeated example, a pet who had learned his place. What they didn't see was the fire spreading behind their backs. Other humans began to follow John's lead, observing the Empire's routines, learning their captors' weaknesses. What started as small acts of defiance, deliberate mistakes in labor, subtle sabotage of equipment, began to escalate. John's first major act of rebellion was simple yet symbolic. During another gathering of Imperial elites, he feigned submission as they displayed him before their guests. Then, without warning, he turned and struck the commander across the face. The room fell silent as the aliens stared in shock, unable to comprehend the audacity of a mere human. John was dragged away, beaten, and thrown into isolation, but the damage was done. His act of defiance sent a clear message. Humans were not pets. Isolation only strengthened John's resolve. In the dark, confined space, he replayed the events in his mind, analyzing every detail. He had expected punishment, but the level of panic he saw in the aliens' eyes surprised him. They weren't used to defiance, especially from a species they deemed inferior. John realized that fear was their weakness. The Empire thrived on obedience and control, but when faced with unpredictability, they faltered. When John was released from isolation, he found that his act of rebellion had ignited a spark among the humans. They looked at him with newfound respect, their eyes alight with hope. John wasted no time in leveraging this momentum. He began organizing small groups, teaching them what he had learned about the Empire's systems. Each group had a specific purpose, one to gather intelligence, another to disrupt operations, and a third to recruit allies. The Empire, still blinded by its arrogance, dismissed the growing resistance as inconsequential. They saw the humans' actions as mere nuisances, failing to recognize the coordinated effort behind them. This complacency allowed John and his allies to operate with surprising effectiveness. They used their captors' own tools against them, hacking into systems and planting subtle disruptions that sowed chaos. John's calm demeanor and strategic mind made him a natural leader. He avoided direct confrontation, knowing the Empire's forces would crush an outright rebellion. Instead, he focused on guerrilla tactics, striking where the Empire was weakest and disappearing before they could retaliate. Each victory, no matter how small, bolstered the humans' morale and drew more allies to their cause. The Empire's elites began to notice the shift, their arrogance giving way to unease. Reports of sabotage and dissent grew more frequent, and the once compliant humans now carried themselves with quiet defiance. The commander who had once owned John grew increasingly paranoid, his frustration boiling over into rage. Yet, even as he tightened his grip, the resistance continued to grow. By the time the Empire realized the extent of the rebellion, it was too late. John and his allies had already laid the groundwork for something far greater than the Empire could comprehend. Humanity, once dismissed as pets, was on the verge of proving its true strength. The first cracks in the Empire's facade had appeared, and John was determined to see it crumble. The cracks in the Empire's foundation widened with every passing day. John's resistance had evolved from subtle acts of defiance into a calculated effort to destabilize the Empire's control. What the aliens failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt and persevere. They had taken humans from their home, stripped them of their freedom, and sought to reduce them to little more than ornaments. But in doing so, they had inadvertently forged a united force, one that was far more dangerous than they could have anticipated. John understood the importance of unity. The humans under the Empire's control came from all walks of life, each with unique skills and experiences. He worked tirelessly to bring them together, creating a network of operatives who shared information and resources. What had started as isolated acts of rebellion now moved with purpose. John's strategy was simple: make the Empire bleed in small but significant ways, forcing them to overextend their resources while keeping the resistance hidden in plain sight. The humans had access to the Empire's technology, albeit in limited capacity. John's teams used this to their advantage, repurposing tools and equipment for their cause. Engineers and tinkerers among the captives developed makeshift devices to sabotage the Empire's operations. They focused on disruption rather than outright destruction, malfunctioning machinery, delayed shipments, and scrambled communications. These minor inconveniences piled up, creating a ripple effect that began to strain the Empire's efficiency. John's leadership was not without its challenges. Trust had to be earned, and fear remained a constant shadow over the humans. The Empire's punishments for dissent were brutal and public, designed to instill compliance. But John countered this with hope. He reminded his people of what they were fighting for, not revenge but freedom. He spoke of a future where they could reclaim their dignity and their lives. His words resonated deeply, sparking a quiet but unshakable determination among the captives. The aliens, accustomed to unquestioned obedience, struggled to comprehend the humans' resilience. Their surveillance systems were advanced, but they lacked the nuance to detect the subtle ways the resistance communicated. John and his operatives relied on old-fashioned methods, coded messages, hand signals, and whispered conversations in the dead of night. They exploited the Empire's over-reliance on technology, using simplicity to outmaneuver complexity. As the resistance grew, so did the risks. John knew that every act of defiance brought them closer to discovery. The Empire's commanders were not fools. They began to notice patterns in the disruptions. Investigations intensified, and suspicion fell on the humans. Yet, this only strengthened the Resistance's resolve. They had already accepted the possibility of sacrifice, understanding that freedom would not come without a price. John's next move was bold but necessary. He orchestrated a coordinated strike against a critical supply depot, a facility vital to the Empire's operations in the sector. The plan required precision and timing, as well as the cooperation of multiple teams. The humans had no access to advanced weapons, relying instead on their ingenuity and resourcefulness. Improvised tools, stolen equipment, and sheer determination became their arsenal. The strike was a success, though not without cost. The humans managed to destroy the depot, cutting off supplies to several key outposts. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Retaliation came in the form of increased security measures and mass detentions. Many of John's operatives were captured or killed, but their sacrifice was not in vain. The attack sent a clear message. Humanity was no longer content to be subjugated. The Empire now faced an enemy that would not be easily subdued. The aftermath of the strike brought both triumph and sorrow. The humans mourned their losses, but their spirits remained unbroken. They had struck a blow against the Empire, proving that resistance was not futile. John used this moment to rally his people, reminding them of the progress they had made. He emphasized that every victory, no matter how small, brought them closer to their ultimate goal. The Empire, meanwhile, found itself in an unfamiliar position. Its leaders, once confident in their dominance, now grappled with the reality of a growing rebellion. They underestimated the humans at every turn, dismissing them as a nuisance rather than a legitimate threat. This arrogance blinded them to the true danger that John and his resistance posed. John's defiance had sparked something far greater than he had anticipated. His actions inspired other captives across the Empire to rise up in their own ways. What had started as a localized resistance began to spread, igniting flames of rebellion on other worlds. The Empire's grip, once unyielding, began to falter under the weight of widespread dissent. Despite their successes, John knew the road ahead would be long and treacherous. The Empire still held overwhelming power, and any misstep could bring the full force of their wrath down upon the humans. But he also knew that they had crossed a threshold. The humans were no longer passive victims. They were fighters, survivors, and strategists. The Empire's greatest mistake was not just underestimating them. It was believing that they could ever be tamed. The Empire's patience had worn thin. What was once dismissed as minor disobedience had escalated into coordinated resistance, and the ruling elites could no longer ignore the growing threat. Security was tightened, patrols increased, and any signs of rebellion were met with swift and brutal crackdowns. But the humans had expected this. They had studied the Empire's patterns, its responses, and its weaknesses. Every move the Empire made only provided more information, more opportunities to exploit. John remained the center of it all, orchestrating the rebellion with meticulous precision. He knew they couldn't match the Empire in direct combat. That was never the goal. Instead, he focused on disruption, on forcing the Empire into a state of paranoia. He and his operatives planted false leads, staged distractions, and turned the aliens against one another. The Empire's own bureaucracy became a weapon against them, with slow-moving chains of command hindering their ability to respond effectively. Despite the increased pressure, the resistance adapted. They relied on hit-and-run tactics, striking at critical infrastructure before disappearing without a trace. The Empire's forces, used to crushing opposition through overwhelming force, struggled against an enemy that refused to engage them on conventional terms. Frustration mounted among the high-ranking officials, their egos unable to comprehend how an inferior species was outmaneuvering them at every turn. John's latest operation was his most ambitious yet. A high-ranking official was scheduled to visit one of the primary labor camps, a perfect opportunity to send a message. The plan was not to assassinate. Killing one leader would do little to shake the empire, but to expose their vulnerabilities. By infiltrating the official security detail, John's team managed to hack into the empire's communication network, broadcasting classified information to every corner of the occupied sectors. It was a display of control, a demonstration that the empire was not as untouchable as it pretended to be. The retaliation was immediate and brutal. Entire groups of suspected rebels were executed, their deaths meant to serve as a warning. But fear no longer controlled the humans. The empire's violence only hardened their resolve. They had seen what submission led to, and they would not go back. The aliens had mistaken fear for control, but now they were realizing their mistake. John knew they were running out of time. The empire's forces would not remain disorganized forever. Eventually, they would adapt. The humans had to strike harder, faster. With the stolen intelligence from the recent operation, they uncovered a vital weakness. A hidden supply chain that connected the empire's outer colonies to its core worlds. It was heavily protected, but not invulnerable. If they could sever it, they could cripple the empire's ability to reinforce its occupation. The attack had to be coordinated across multiple sectors, requiring alliances with other enslaved species. Many were hesitant at first, unwilling to believe that the humans could stand against the empire. But John didn't ask for blind faith. He showed them proof, data, tactics, victories. He spoke of something greater than revenge, something beyond mere survival. He offered freedom. The alliance was uneasy, but necessity overpowered distrust. The plan moved forward, and the coordinated assault on the empire's supply chain was executed with ruthless efficiency. Cargo ships were hijacked, fuel depots destroyed, and trade routes rendered useless. Within days, the empire's logistical network was in chaos. Resources meant to sustain their war efforts vanished, and the once stable occupation began to fracture. For the first time, the empire was on the defensive. What had started as an annoyance had become a legitimate crisis. John had forced them into a position they never thought possible, reacting instead of dictating. The humans had proven that they were not just survivors. They were strategists, warriors, and something far more dangerous than the empire had ever anticipated. They were free thinkers, and no empire could survive against a force that refused to be controlled. The empire was unraveling. What had once been an unshakable regime, feared and unquestioned, was now struggling to maintain control. The humans had done more than disrupt operations. They had shattered the illusion of imperial invincibility. Their rebellion had spread beyond their own ranks, inspiring other subjugated species to resist in their own ways. The empire had ruled through fear, but fear was now working against them. The more brutal their reprisals became, the more they proved how desperate they were. John knew they were nearing the tipping point. The empire was wounded, but a wounded beast was at its most dangerous. Desperation made them reckless, and they had begun to deploy measures that spoke to their increasing instability. Entire planets were locked down, mass executions were broadcasted to instill fear, and elite strike forces were sent to hunt down the resistance leaders. John himself had become their most wanted target. His name spoken with hatred and dread among the empire's ruling class. He had expected this. The final phase of his plan wasn't to destroy the empire outright. That was impossible. Instead, the goal was to break their will to fight, to make ruling humanity more costly than abandoning them. The empire thrived on efficiency, on calculated dominance. But now, nothing about their occupation of Earth and its people was efficient. Every shipment lost, every facility sabotaged, every officer assassinated made their grip weaker. The humans had transformed from subjects to a liability, and John was going to make sure the empire realized it. His last and greatest move was a direct attack on the empire's leadership. Not with weapons, but with information. Over the years, his operatives had gathered damning intelligence, proof of corruption, of failures, of weaknesses that the ruling elite had kept hidden from their own forces. Using the empire's own broadcasting systems, John's team spread this information across their entire territory. Soldiers learned that their leaders were using them as disposable assets. Civilians saw the cracks in the Empire's supposed superiority. Division took root, and once loyal forces began to question their orders. The response was chaos. Internal conflicts erupted as trust between the military and leadership eroded. The once efficient war machine of the Empire ground to a halt, burdened by infighting and paranoia. With their forces stretched thin and morale crumbling, the Empire finally made the decision John had been pushing them toward from the start. They began withdrawing. Not all at once, and not without retaliation, but the retreat had begun. The moment the First Fleet left, the humans knew they had won. They had broken an empire not through brute force, but through sheer defiance, through strategy, through the unyielding refusal to be conquered. They had turned their captors' arrogance against them and shown them what it truly meant to fight for survival. John didn't celebrate. Victory was not the end, it was the beginning. The Empire might leave, but others would come. Humanity could never be complacent again. They had proven they were not pets, not slaves, not subjects. They were something far more dangerous. They were free, and they would never let anyone take that from them again.